Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the weekly immigration news recap, where we break down what changed in U.S. immigration this week and what signals came from the Trump administration that could impact your immigration situation if you're a foreign national or your client strategy if you're an immigration practitioner. Today is Friday, July 11th. It's around 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this episode will be released later today for you all to listen to. We're coming back after skipping last week and not releasing an episode over the July 4th holiday weekend. And I don't have to tell any of the immigration practitioners who are listening that nothing in the news or in probably your work really slowed down this week. So I'm recording this episode a little bit later than usual. We normally do it on Thursdays. And that's because I had not one, but two immigration attorneys lined up to join me for today's episode to recap and comment on the news. And both had to reschedule for two completely different, completely separate, but equally important client fires that needed to be put out. And so for the folks who weren't able to join, the two attorneys who weren't able to join, I won't name you, but we hope to have you on soon if you're listening. Okay. We're going to roll with this anyway. We're still going to cover the news. It's going to be just me today. So I'm going to keep the episode a little bit shorter, but I'm still going to try and touch on all the headlines of what's happened in the immigration landscape over the last 2 weeks in the courts, in Congress, where there's some news. And then also, as always, inside the Trump administration, inside the agencies, USCIS, Department of Labor, some news from those places as well. But before we do that, I just want to make a couple of plugs since it is just me today and I don't have a guest co-host here with me having to listen to me babble. So a couple plugs here that we have coming up for the immigration practitioner community here at Lawfully. So first is next week on Wednesday, July 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern, which is 10 a.m. Pacific. My colleague Matt Gale and Doug Rand are going to be hosting our next Immigration Insiders meeting. And the link to get the details for that meeting will be in the description of the podcast on Spotify or YouTube, wherever you're listening or watching. So if you haven't attended one of our Immigration Insiders meetings before, we host these sessions every 2 weeks, and they're designed specifically for immigration practitioners, not for foreign nationals. But for attorneys, for anyone at immigration law firms, we also tend to have a lot of former government officials join the call as well, folks who recently left USCIS, the immigration sections at the Department of Labor, and then also folks from think tanks and other advocacy groups. And then we always, in the meetings, feature a prominent, what we call an immigration insider, meaning it's someone who deeply understands the inner workings of immigration policymaking inside the government. So folks we've had on the past have included Andrew Kraybaum, who's one of the best immigration reporters in the game from Bloomberg Law, always has his finger on the pulse of what's coming down the pipeline from both the courts and the Trump administration on immigration policy. We also had John Baselis on a couple of weeks ago. He's currently the head of government relations and an executive vice president at BDV Solutions, but for a long time he was the head of government affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and was involved in pretty much every major immigration policymaking occurrence of the last 10 years. Before that, he worked for now Secretary of State Marco Rubio when Rubio was in the Senate. So that was a really great discussion meeting that we had. But once a month, we have Doug Rand join us. And if you're unfamiliar with Doug, he was senior advisor to the USCIS director from 2021 to 2025. And before that, he was an assistant director for entrepreneurship in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy from 2010 to 2017, so during the Obama administration. And he played a big role in some of the immigration initiatives related to entrepreneurship that came out of the Obama administration. He also co-founded Boundless Immigration. So he's one of those unique folks who deeply understands both the inside workings of government, having spent a lot of his career there, but also the demands of being a private sector immigration provider. And so we're really excited to have Doug back on next week and dive into a lot of what's happening in the immigration landscape, but also a couple of more things, because what makes our sessions unique is that we treat them as meetings, not as webinars. So every meeting is two-way. And what that means is the majority of the session is for immigration attorneys to come on stage, share your point of view, ask Doug questions directly while being on the stage, and have a back and forth exchange with him or our other immigration insiders on the topics that are most relevant to you. In our last 5 meetings, we've had a few dozen immigration attorneys join each time, and A handful come up during each meeting and have a great exchange with their insiders. And so far, the feedback on the meetings has been, this new format that we're doing has been great because, with how quickly new policy and procedural changes are being put into effect by the Trump administration, having this regular meetup of attorneys and government experts and advocacy folks and journalists and others, people like Doug at the helm, to share information in real time has been really valuable for the folks that attend. And it's difficult to keep up with all of the news and put it into context and understand, like, is this rumor or is this, leaked proposed rule that's being, considered inside of DHS right now going to impact your immigration practice, your clients? It's difficult to parse that out. And in this meeting, we try to, one, make you aware of things that maybe you're not aware of, and two, contextualize it and help you understand, like, what is actually going to happen? What's the timeline for new rules or new policies that may have been introduced, or new trends that we're seeing at Lawfully, or that your fellow practitioners are getting early signals of through their client work? And that's sort of our goal in the meeting. It's to continue to build a place where immigration attorneys can come, they can get valuable information that helps you inform your client strategy, and that isn't accessible anywhere else. And on that, part of that comes from the insights of folks like Doug, Michael Valverde, who is the former Associate Director of Operations at USCIS. He oversaw all 89 field offices. He'll be on July 23rd. The insights of folks like that isn't something that you can get anywhere else. But also, in each meeting, we spend part of it pulling back the curtain on Lawfully's real-time USCIS case processing data. So because we've tracked more than 6 million cases in our consumer app, and we have hundreds of thousands of active monthly foreign national users tracking their specific immigration cases through the Lawfully app, we've been able to develop one of the largest, if not the largest, private data set on government case processing trends, the most detailed data set in the private sector. So when you come to one of our Immigration Insiders meetings and we walk through some of these trends, you don't have to wait 6 to 9 months to see what the published USCIS data says on case processing trends. And you don't have to rely solely on hearsay from your peers. In our meeting, what we share is the real-time case processing data from USCIS, from DOL, and from some of the other government agencies related to immigration as well. And a lot of the data that we do draw from our Lawfully database is requested by the folks who come to the meeting. So we try to make it as relevant as possible for the practitioners who are on the call and their specific practices and client bases. So next week, Doug and Matt will be looking at some real-time USCIS processing trends for I-765 asylum cases, which is something Doug touched on in our last meeting on June 25th. And then we're also going to be looking, by popular demand, at some RFE and NOID trends specifically for H-1Bs, L-1s, and hopefully a few other employment-based case types as well. I know there's been a lot of demand from our attendees around EB-1As and EB-2 NIWs, so we're going to try to pull that data together as well for the meeting, so you can see what RFE rates were for the last couple of months and sort of where they stand in July. So check out the meeting details and to register for the meeting in the description. And please, if you're a practitioner listening, I would love to have you join the meeting and come with what trends you're seeing in your practice and with your clients, and any questions you have about sort of what the future of the Trump administration's policymaking around immigration might have in store. And any requests you have on more real-time USCIS case processing trends or DOL case processing trends that we can share with you in future meetings. So that's my long plug on Immigration Insiders. All the details will be in the description below. Another teaser announcement that I have on that note is that starting I hope the next week or two, the Immigration Insiders meeting will not be the only place where you can access Lawfully's exclusive data on real-time government case processing trends. So I'm excited to sort of tease an announcement that we're going to launch a new weekly newsletter that will share some of the most consequential highlights from the government case processing data that we're tracking at Lawfully. So we actively track case processing trends up to the day for over 100 different case types pending with USCIS, with NVC, with the Department of Labor, and more. So in each week's newsletter, just to give you a taste of it, you can expect to see charts and data visuals showing trends like RFE issuances for H-1B petitions, which is a data point that when it's released by USCIS, it has a 6 to 9 month lag time. So if you want to know what RFE trends are for July, uh, and you're relying on the USCIS data, you're not going to find that out until December, January, February of next year. Whereas we're tracking that data right now in real time. And our hope is that, you can use the data in that newsletter to make strategic decisions for your firm and for your clients. We do our best to directly benchmark our data to the official historical government data as well. So if we're showing you RFE rates, we show you the historical USCIS data on it, and then we show you the Lawfully data as well, so that you can actually have confidence in, our sample of data. So I hope to have a more official announcement on the release of that newsletter next week. And when I do, I'll share a link where folks can subscribe. But this is all part of our effort at Lawfully to make our data more accessible to immigration attorneys, because with how fast moving and volatile immigration policy changes are under the Trump administration, we understand that access to reliable data and information is crucial to practitioners, and that's something that we want to provide. Okay, and last plug before we go into the news, I'm always looking for immigration attorneys to join me as a guest co-host on this podcast. We've had a couple of great attorneys join in the past few weeks, including Dan Moranci from WR Immigration, Jas Shao from Shao Law Firm, James Hollis from McEntee Law Group, and others. And I'm always looking to bring on more diverse perspectives from the immigration practitioner community. So if you're an attorney, if you focus on employment-based immigration, family-based, asylum, a mix of all the above, or anything else, I'd love to get you on to hear your point of view on the immigration news of the week. And what you're seeing inside of your practice, and how the roller coaster of policy changes from the Trump administration are impacting your clients. So would love to have you on. You can my email, I'll put it in the description as well, so you can reach out to me. And LinkedIn's also an easy way to reach out to me. And the listenership of this podcast includes global mobility and HR professionals, other immigration legal professionals, and then foreign nationals. So every episode that we release is featured on the Lawfully mobile app, for the hundreds of thousands of active foreign national users of the Lawfully app to see when we release it. So joining the podcast, it's a great way to get your name and your brand out there for foreign nationals who may require your services. So again, my email will be in the description, so you can reach out to me if you're interested in coming on. I'd love to have you. Okay, very long lead in, but all that stuff I hope is relevant to you, and it'll help you better consume and understand some of the news that we're about to go through. But with that, let's go ahead and jump into the headlines. So starting with the courts, there's been in the last several weeks this ongoing debate, and even a little bit before that, around the Trump administration's efforts to end birthright citizenship. There was a Supreme Court decision a couple of weeks ago that sort of seemed to rule in the favor of the Trump administration. But this week, a federal judge in New Hampshire blocked the Trump birthright citizenship order. This is reported in Reuters by Nate Raymond, who's a court reporter there. This is an ongoing debate and discussion, and this is sort of just the next thing in this ongoing story. But essentially, as of right now, the effort to end birthright citizenship continues to be in limbo, but it seems to be something that the Trump administration is very aggressively pursuing. So I don't think that it will stop here, and it will continue. And we'll continue to share updates on this story as well. Meanwhile, in Congress, you may have seen over the July 4th holiday weekend that President Trump signed into law the One Big Beautiful Bill that was making its way through Congress pretty rapidly, sort of at the end of June, beginning of July, before the 4th of July holiday there. This is an analysis from the American Immigration Council on the repercussions of this bill now being law, the One Big Beautiful Bill, specifically around the immigration provision. So as always, I'll link this in the description of the podcast so you can come in and take a look at it yourself. And if you're just listening, I'll try to describe some of what we're looking at here. But you can also pop over to YouTube and watch the video version of this podcast as well. But essentially, the new law that was put into place, the headline news is the increase in funding, specifically for ICE, for the border wall, and here it is here in this chart here, for ICE, for the border wall, and for several other enforcement initiatives from the Trump administration that have been long-standing on the wish list for them. And all of that funding is going to start going into place in the next couple of months here. There's a long list that we're looking at right now, and I'm not going to read the numbers off, but it's billions of dollars being allocated to ICE, to the border wall, and to border security in general, and to a larger enforcement initiatives from the Trump administration, all totaling around $150 billion in new spending in immigration enforcement, which is obviously a huge paradigm shift in sort of the resource allocation around immigration policy. At a more granular level, something that we've covered in past news recaps is the increased immigration fees that were included in previous versions of the bill. And what the American Immigration Council does a really good job of is tracking how those fee increase proposals changed in the original House version of the bill from earlier this year to the Senate version of the bill, which is essentially what ended up getting passed in reconciliation when the bill went back to the House, and ultimately what President Trump signed into law. I should note that this analysis from the American Immigration Council, I think, was released on July 2nd. So it was before reconciliation was complete. So there may be some fees here that are not exactly right. They may have changed. I'm not sure, but it's still a great resource, very in depth by the American Immigration Council, just showing increased fees. For example, asylum application fees, filing a I-589 asylum application. Before, there didn't used to be a fee, or up until now, there hasn't been a fee. The House originally proposed that $1,000 fee. That didn't make it through the Senate, but the Senate version includes a $100 fee. And a lot of attorneys on LinkedIn have been talking about this, who work with asylum clients. There's also, a handful of other, fee changes and fee increases and form and regulatory increases that I think immigration practitioners need to be aware of. So not going to do a deep dive on this today, but it's maybe something that we'll do in the future and sort of forecast what the new increased cost of immigration will be now that the One Big Beautiful Bill is going to become, or is law, and will be put into effect here in the next couple of months. Okay, those are the two big ones from Congress and the courts that I wanted to highlight today. As always, a lot coming out of the Trump administration from the various agencies. So this story that we're looking at right here, if you're watching on screen, and if you're listening, I'll explain it, is sort of quietly at the end of June, a new rule was proposed by the Department of Homeland Security and submitted to the Office of Management and Budget, just the formal rulemaking process that most departments and agencies have to go through to effectively end the duration of status option for which in particular is really relevant for F1 students, F1 OPT holders. NAFSA, which is a great organization, that's what we're looking at here, sort of broke down what the implications of this rule could be. So I'll go ahead and link this in the description as well. But also I wanted to flag just a sort of initial analysis, an immediate reaction from Travis Feuerbacher, who's somebody I follow closely on LinkedIn for any sort of news or commentary on what's going on with F1 students, the consulates abroad. He himself is a former consular officer, and now he's one of the owner-operators of ZF visas. But Travis essentially, commented that if this rule goes into effect and duration of status is ended, students, researchers, representatives of foreign media, he includes in there as well, will now be admitted into the United States when they get their visa for a fixed period of time. And then, like a lot of other visa holders, will have to, through USCIS, request an extension or go back to a consulate overseas to get an extension of those visas. They can't just stay in the U.S., not indefinitely, but as long as whatever program is their visas attached to is running for, which is obviously very common for students. So this would be a massive, massive shift, a lot to unpack here. And maybe we'll try to get Travis on the podcast or another former consular officer at some point to sort of walk through the implications of this. But essentially could cause some, my first takeaway is that if all of a sudden there's a need for an influx of F1 extensions, for example, that need to be filed with USCIS, that's going to contribute to a lot of the processing backlogs that we've seen historically and that we're already starting to see an uptick for in some categories. And as some folks in the comments of this post pointed out, it's also going to cause an influx of work for university DSOs and university international offices, for example. Same with employers and, of course, law firms who represent both of those groups, and for the students themselves and the other individuals who would be impacted by this rule change. So something we're keeping a very close eye on, but just wanted to flag it here, and I'll include the link to Travis's post so those listening can go take a look. Another big headline that happened over the holiday weekend, this one's from Ted Hessen, who's the immigration reporter, one of the immigration reporters at Reuters. Trump to end deportation protections for thousands of Hondurans and Nicaraguans. So if you've been following the news, news on the Trump administration's actions around TPS in the last 6 months or so. He's ended, TPS programs, or taken action to end TPS programs, for Venezuelans, for Haitians, for Afghans, folks from Cameroon. And now that's extending to Hondurans and Nicaraguans as well. In the article lays out this action, which would be effective on September 6th, would end TPS for an estimated 72,000 Hondurans and 4,000 Nicaraguans who've had access to the status going back to 1999. So likely, like with a lot of the other actions around TPS and asylum, to be challenged in the courts. It's a story that we'll continue to provide updates on, but just a new headline and sort of following the trend from the Trump administration on ending a lot of these, or taking actions to end or decrease the size of a lot of these asylum and protection programs, many of which were expanded under the Biden administration. Then finally, a whole bunch of news from the Department of Labor. There was sort of an ongoing debate that James and I, and then Sam Peak in the week before that in this podcast covered around the Trump administration's actions to conduct raids, for ICE to conduct raids at employer sites, specifically with farms and Home Depots and hotels and seasonal workplaces being targeted. There was a big debate inside the administration. There was a lot of contradictions back and forth in sort of what the Trump administration's policies were going to be. I think that debate is continuing. There were even reports that the Secretary of Agriculture was pushing for an amnesty program for undocumented agricultural workers. That's in the last day or two sort of been stamped out, but I think the reporting on that is pretty solid. But this one from Andrew Krabaum at Bloomberg Law back on July 2nd, so just before the weekend, reported that DOL is launching a new office to streamline access to work visas. Essentially what it is a temporary office of immigration policy that will focus on employment-based visas. And it's really just placing an existing office, the Office of Foreign Labor Certification, which all immigration practitioners will be very familiar with. The stated goals by the Secretary of Labor, and this is also sort of in conjunction with the Secretary of Agriculture, will be really to have this office focus on streamlining the H-2A and H-2B visa programs. But it was also cited in the leaked memo that Andrew links here for anyone who wants to go to the article and check out the memo themselves. It also cites PERM, PWDs, which all immigration practitioners know have a really big backlog. But if you're following the public debate closely around a lot of these issues, it's more likely that this new office and generally the priorities of the Department of Labor are going to be focused on agricultural and seasonal workers, both undocumented and those working or striving to work under the H-2A and H-2B visa programs. And here's another one from Andrew at Bloomberg Law, where he did a deep dive on sort of how the Trump administration has been addressing the H-2A visa program specifically over the last, for the first 5 or 6 months of its administration. Recently, they got rid of some worker protections for H-2A workers that had been put in place by the Department of Labor under the Biden administration. And as Andrew points out, with a lot of the crossover between employers who are employing undocumented workers to work on farms and employers that use H-2A visas, the increased enforcement from ICE, the increased worksite rates on farms is causing more demand for the H-2A visa. So another story that we're just going to be keeping an eye on, especially with the seasonal visa like the H-2A. And then lastly, from the State Department, I wanted to plug our last guest host, James Hollis's newsletter, The Consular Update, which I read every single week. And I recommend, if you're an immigration practitioner or for national, you go and subscribe to this newsletter as well. I'll include the link in the description for where you can subscribe. But this week's newsletter just had a couple of updates about what's going on at consulates abroad from James. Two that stuck out to me that I just wanted to highlight in the podcast here. And then again, I recommend you go and you read the entire newsletter. But the first is that Mission India is changing its visa policy, its visa pickup policy as of August 1st of this year, August 1st, 2025, that other than parents picking up visas for kids, applicants must pick up their own visa from collection locations. So this is just a change in policy, and James sort of cites his reasons for why he thinks this is taking place. And then the other that I think is worth calling out is that there's been apparently a new update for the AIS scheduling system, which is not permitting applicants for visa appointments at consulates abroad to proceed with scheduling their appointment if the DS-160 has not been submitted. So this is also a new change and something that immigration practitioners should keep an eye on. So I'll go ahead and I'll include the link to the consular update from James. So you can go ahead and read this whole thing, but just wanted to share the headline of the podcast. And that's it for me for today. There's a lot of news that we maybe didn't hit on from the past 2 weeks, but I wanted to at least get the headlines that I think are most relevant to immigration practitioners. So I'll be back next week, hopefully with an attorney guest, to break down whatever happens between now and then from the Trump administration and the courts and Congress. And in the meantime, I'm sharing it on the screen here, but please be sure if you're an immigration practitioner to register for our Immigration Insiders meeting, which is again next Wednesday, July 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Meeting details will be spotlighted in the description below. It's going to be a great meeting, so I hope you can join us. With that, we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.